What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I'm going to bring you a different type of video. Today I'm going to be talking about the different types of engines that can support the branded Despia deck. Now I'm not taking into account the Despias themselves, as I feel because they pretty much search you out your best card in the deck being branded Fusion, that 99.999% of the time it's always going to be involved. So right now I'm going to talk about the engines that are seeing some play, some not play, and you'll see so many different versions of the deck. And what I mean by that is we're going to talk about the Nadir Servant engine, we're going to talk about the Triple Tactics Thrust into Fusion Duplication, darkworld No More kind of engine as well. We'll talk about the Bestials, why they're not in the decks, or some are, some aren't, the Super Poly engine, the Duality engine, and then of course the most recent version of the Chimeras or the Illusion engine. I've also kind of got Give It Puppet here because some people play it in the main, some people don't, but I feel that's more of a side deck card rather than anything else, and it's more so just the play style. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I thought this would be quite informative for those that are new to the deck, or for those that are looking at why or what type of engines should be considered. Now obviously there's pros and cons to every single one of these engines, some of them being cost, some of them being just application, and some of them just being general specific requirements. So I'm going to start off with the first one being Bestials, because I feel this is the most, the easiest one to kind of talk about and discuss. So, with the Bestials, some people don't even play Magnamut, some people don't even play Beasts. At the base minimum, some people play Lubellion and Saranir, and this is purely because Lubellion can get you access to your branded Lost. So, why are the Bestials in and sometimes out? Well, they are in and out dependent on the format. Personally, in my most recent build, these were the four that I was playing. Access to them is also a little bit tricky, but with the Megatins just around the corner, these are all being reprinted and should be a lot easier to get hold of. I feel the deck, or this particular engine as a support engine, is very, very good at what it does, but I also feel that it is more down to format specifics. And what I mean by that is if the format, quite like Super Poly, does not utilize the light and dark attributes, where you can actually use these to become more interruptive than just general combo extenders, then it does become a little bit of an issue, and it does minimize the factor of the deck. That being said as well, with Branded Beast, there's also one of the ones where it's ideal going first. It can be quite useful going second because it can be activated face up thanks to Lubellion. So it does give you a bit of utility to spot remove. But unlike Dragon Link that can utilize the engine generally a lot better, it really is one of them ones that is either personal preference, local environment, and a little bit down to play style. So following off the back of the Bestials, we'll talk about another one that is down to local environment, just general format, and that is the Super Poly engine. Now we're going to talk about some of the Super Poly targets. Obviously you do have others like Dracus Depelia, but I feel that that's a card that is already in your main deck. So when you're looking at the Super Poly engine, well, what are its pros? Quite simply, it is an insanely powerful board breaker. Being able to make sure that your opponent cannot respond to it as well is really, really invaluable. And it can lead you to stuff like draws, targeted protection, or just generally being able to break an incredibly powerful board, such as the Manadiums. Why is Super Poly maybe not so good? What are its cons? Well, quite simply, it does come down to format specific. And in a deck like Branded, when you're already discarding cards for a core component in the form of Lubellion, it can get a little bit taxing, constantly discarding cards. So it does have that benefit of being able to break boards very easily, but it does come down to, again, the specific environment. If your specific environment does not run into Mud Dragon or Garura, which very few decks won't do that, it does become less effective for you. The other benefit of something like Super Poly is it can help you push for game, but it can also be very disruptive. So it does have that balance of, again, first, second, combo protection, or of course general extension. There's so many times where I've actually activated Super Poly, and the best time I like to do it is when I normal summon a monster and my opponent attempts to negate it with a targeted effect, and I can activate Super Poly to run it out of the way and then also use my opponent's board as well. Talking about being able to dodge certain hand traps and moving into everything else, let's look at another engine, and that is Duality. So as you can see, I'm kind of working my way up to engines that are more commonly used and that have more effective applications. So let's talk about the Duality engine. Now the Duality engine, when it first came out, I fell in love with it. I thought this is such a great card for the deck. Being able to dodge targeted effects on stuff like Lubellion, being able to upgrade it into something like a Borreload Furious Dragon to give a different form of interruption, meaning that I didn't have to play Dark Magician in the main deck and I could actually utilize the Dust Dragon in my combos a little bit more because I don't really want it to stay on the board. So being able to turn this into a Dragoon again was near invaluable. The fact it also has a nice little graveyard banish to recycle lights and darks and draw a card is also very, very nice. However, it did come down to limiting the type of targets you could actually change it into and having it at the exact same time your opponent attempts to activate an effect. Now, what I mean by limiting what you can go into, ideally you would turn in something like an Albion into a Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, which was a nice kind of interaction. You would turn in your Grignol Dust Dragon into a Dragoon, and you would probably be turning a Lubellion into Furious. And you would probably turn in your Lubellion Dragon into a Furious Dragon if you were playing it and had the space for it. So again, it did take a bit of toll on your extra deck, quite like Super Polys, where it did require anywhere between 2, 3, maybe even 4 extra deck spaces, and that's exactly what this did. It does mean that if you're not playing Duality and you're not main decking Dark Magician, you can choose not to play Dragoon, even though it is incredibly powerful, and just being able to add out insanely big powerful boards could make it a must use. But that's when you need to start looking at your other targets, and that is what leads us into the Dogmatika engine. The reason I'm going to talk about the Dogmatika engine in kind of tandem with Duality is because the Dogmatikas do give you some great targets. Fleur Delis and Dogmatika Maximus are great targets for your Duality, so it might be an engine you may consider playing in tandem for the pure fact that you could play 3 Nadir's Servant and then either 1 Maximus, 1 Fleur Delis, or an Ecclesia if you're feeling extra spicy, and then the 3 Dualities. So Nadir's Servant, what makes this card or engine so good in the deck? Well, I think is a great fallback should you get Ash Blossomed, and that is one of the biggest issues of the deck. Ash Blossom is its greatest weakness to Branded Fusion because it's very few ways that you can actually stop it unless you are playing Crossout Designator. Now, I'm not going to include Crossout Designator in the list of engines to consider, purely because, again, I feel that actually takes up a heck of a lot of space, and that is more of a specific requirement. I feel the only hand trap you really fear is possibly Nibiru, more so Imperm, and definitely Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, so I feel that you're really going to need to pack out your deck if you're not naturally playing those cards anyway. So with Nadir's Servant, I feel that these are engines that are a little bit better to go, okay, well, I'm going to crack back if you do Ash me. If you do Ash me, I'm going to be looking more for a Nadir's Servant rather than trying to stop that Ash Blossom, because also what a lot of people forget is if I stop your Ash Blossom, it also can lead me to stopping my Ash Blossom if I'm using something like a Call by the Grave. So what the Nadir's Servant engine has is it's one of them ones that you can activate, or you have to activate at the end of the turn, because it does lock you out of summoning from the extra deck from that point onwards. So it's one of the ones where you've attempted to activate Branded Fusion, it does get ashed, and you go, right, okay, what do I do now? Well, that's when Nadir's Servant comes in and leads you all the way to Quem, and Quem is then able to set you up your fusion plays. It will require some other involvement from other cards in the deck, but that's also where you have access to Maximus, because Quem is a Dogmatika and it is a Despia card, meaning that you could use a card like Maximus to get you more advantage from your extra deck. Being able to send loads of cards like Albion that you might not be able to get to set you up, so stuff like Branded in Red, or set you up a follow-up for Branded Fusion, Branded Banishment, even Expulsion, if that card comes back, is very, very good. You can also utilize some other extra deck monsters, such like your Lulu Walif, to give you another access to Quem in the end phase if you want to, or of course Fleur Delis or Ecclesia. On top of that, you do have options to send stuff like Elder Entity Ints to deal with a opponent's card on the board, so that does give you a form of interruption, and it can also help you play other cards or leading you into playing other Branded Fusion monsters to give you access to a Makoria in the end phase, or possibly anything else. You could also play the Predaplant Chimera Flesia, because that will give you access to any fusion spell in your entire deck, should you want to play that very spicy one-off that can help you push you to the next level and break your opponent's board. So the Nadir engine is probably one of my favourites. I am quite partial to the next one that I'm going to talk about slightly in a second, but I do feel that it's a very nice option to crack back because it can be a minimum of 3 cards, meaning that you've got a lot more space in your deck to play around with, and then it can work its way up to be a 4-card engine, 5-card engine, or higher. Speaking of my new favourite, or one of my new favourites, is of course the Triple Tactics Thrust engine with a card such as Fusion Duplication. Now, the reason this one works so well is, again, is to combat the Ash Blossom activation. So when your opponent activates Ash Blossom, you're going to activate something like Triple Tactics Thrust, and you're going to set a Fusion Duplication, which basically means you can Branded Fuse during your opponent's turn. That is the main kind of involvement of where the Thrust implication came from, but you also need to consider what else Thrust can do for you. That can get you access to something like Triple Tactics Talents. It can also get you access to board breakers like Darkworld and No More, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Evenly Matched. So it does combine that balance of going first and second, which Nadir Servant doesn't have as much of, because the chances are if you're going second and then negate your Branded Fusion, they might have another card set up to negate your Nadir Servant, or that ability to ultimately go, okay, well, I don't care what you get off Nadir Servant, I'm not going to really fear that as much. Whereas being able to activate something like Triple Tactics Thrust, going first, you're threatening a second Branded Fusion, or Branded Fusion during your opponent's turn, and you're also threatening some of the strongest board breakers in the entire game, and also leaving your opponent with a bit more to worry about. Yes, quite like the next engine we're going to talk about, it is a much more costlier option, because when you're looking at your Triple Tactics Thrust, you're going to want to be playing 2 or maybe even 3 of the card, and that is going to set you back anywhere from about £150 to maybe £180 just for those 3 cards. I do think it's a very nice option for the balance of first and second, but then when you're trying to take budget into consideration, Nadir Servant might be your next best option, or Super Poly if you are trying to break boards consistently. So now on to the final engine to talk about. Now this is the most recent addition to the deck, and that is of course the Chimera / Branded Illusion engine. Now this one is quite costly because it has started to go up in price, especially when you're looking at Chimera King of the Phantom Beasts. Now you may not need to consider the Chimera the Illusion Beast, but you will need to consider the future support that this set is getting in Age of Overlord. The one major downside of this particular engine is that it is a very hefty engine. You could be looking at anywhere between 3 of each of these, 2 of those, 2 of those, and 3 of the Chimera Fusion. So straight away, you're bumping up an average of 3 cards all the way up to about a 15-card engine, and you might as well then just be Branded Illusion and completely cut down, if not cut out, the Despia engine itself. Now the pros of an engine like this is it gives you the ability of being able to rip one from your opponent's hand, while also setting you up some very nice negate protection in the graveyard, or a monster negate with Mirror Sword, and of course a targeted negate with Kotal. It also gives you great ways of being able to maintain some resource, being able to loop back your Chimera Fusion, give you greater access to the Guardian Chimera as well, and also being able to constantly search out, even though you are locked into fusions, who cares, other components, so it becomes a 1-card combo to get you into a Chimera the King of Phantom Beasts, ripping one from your opponent's hand, and that still doesn't include your Branded Fusion in your hand, being allowing you to kind of build up your board even more. That's the other difference with this engine as well, is it does give you that option of being able to play this and bait out an Ash Blossom before you get into your Branded Fusion, and still cause your opponent quite a few issues, because at the base minimum, the 1-card combo is going to give you enough resource to set up your Chimera King with a negate in the graveyard, a targeted protection set ready to go, and you're going to rip one from your opponent's hand, looping back the Chimera Fusion so that it can be activated to get you into a Guardian Chimera. So from 1 card, you're pretty much setting up the ability to rip one, pop one, negate one, and protect one with targeting as well, and draw a couple of cards all together. So it does do a little bit more than the Branded Fusion engine, because when you think about the Branded Fusion engine itself, even if you were to turn it down to a 1-card combo and go off the back of Albion, you are going to be pushing yourself into a little bit of a corner by just setting up a Mirror Jade, whereas this just gives you so much more, but it does require so much more investment into the deck. Not just financially, but also the space that is going to be taken up. It's going to take up anywhere from 1/4 to even 1/3 of the deck, and that's why there are just illusion builds going out there as pure decks themselves, rather than even considering the mixture with Branded. So that is pretty much all the engines that I feel are worth talking about that are in the kind of public eye right now, and a lot that you might be considering adding to your branded deck and going, well, why should I use this one? What is the better one for me? Well, ultimately, when you look at it, there is a lot to kind of take into consideration. Like I said, budget is pretty much your first thing you should be looking at, and that will then allow you to filter down the type of engine you should be looking for. If you are on a much tighter budget, considering that we have just had a rare print of Mud Dragon, a common print of Super Poly, and we are getting a reprint in the Megatins for Garura, the Super Poly engine is not that bad and is incredibly powerful to break boards. Speaking of the Megatins, you've also got to consider the Bestials. I feel Bestials are less within this pile, but it's still something worth mentioning because, again, budget restrictions may be more ideal come post-ban list, post-ban list, and of course the tins. Duality can be quite cheap, but the only reason to be playing Duality is if you are going to be playing a card like Dragoon. I would say that is its best target from the extra deck, and Dragoon, of course, is a little bit costly, nothing too extravagant, but might set you back about 20 quid. You've also got to consider Nadir Servant as well. Now, Nadir Servant itself, I think you can still get Ultras for about £10 a copy, but straight away you're looking at a £30 investment. It's probably the second cheapest of all of these upgrades when you can consider the Super Poly as, my opinion, as the cheapest one. It does give you a very nice option to be able to play through an Ash Blossom, or of course you can just go, you know what, I'm actually going to play the Fright Fur Patchwork engine, but the issue with that is it does run headfirst into Droll, whereas something like Nadir Servant can play after Droll. So you would go Brand of Fusion, Ash, okay, Nadir Servant, bring a card, activate Droll, and you go, right, okay, well, the rest of the cards I'm going to send are just going to be set on my board anyway. Then, of course, you start looking into your more expensive inclusions. Obviously, the Chimera engine would then be the second most expensive. I believe the Chimera King is sitting at around about £30 a copy. And then trying to find the supers, they are possibly going to be £2 to £3 each. So you're looking at about 10, 20-ish, maybe 30, 40, 50, maybe £60 for the engine. And that's obviously going to be a fraction cheaper in comparison to the Frost engine, because even if you were to go for 2 Frost, 1 duplication, and then play a lot of normal spell or trap board breakers, then you're going to be looking at the base minimum just to get the Frosts at around about £100 to £150, depending if you want to play 2 or 3. So that's where your budget is going to really help you narrow this down. And then, of course, you do need to consider your local environment. If the local environment does falter to something like Super Poly, it is a must inclusion. Same for the Bestials. If they don't and your local environment is very varied, but everyone has access to Ash Blossom, then the Nadir Servant is probably the best one to go to, or Frosts if you have the budget to do. One that I am really enjoying right now, of course, is the Chimera engine as well, but you do need to consider how much it is going to adapt your build. Whether you're going to push your build to a 55 card version, or if you're just going to go absolutely ham and go all in on it and try and keep it to a 40 card engine as well. You can minimize the engine as a complete total, but that will adapt its consistency within the build as well. So, I hope this has been informative for all of you branded players out there. I really do enjoy the deck. I feel it's something that will definitely be surviving the ban list. And even if it does take a little knock on the ban list, it will still find ways to adapt and become even stronger. Hopefully, unless Branded Fusion gets hit and then, you know, maybe we're going back to square one. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you do have any questions at all, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. If you do have any other engines that you choose to play in your build, then let me know. It'll be very interesting to see what other variants and variations are out there for everyone to see and enjoy as well. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.